Raza community, welcome to our office hours. Make sure I've got my chat so I can see everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I am joined today. I know the card says that Ben is going to join us, and I mentioned that last week, but last minute change of plans. Instead, we've got the fantastic Chris, who you're actually on the same team as Ben and have the same job title. Not that you're replaceable or interchangeable in any way, but if you had prepared questions specifically for Ben, Chris should also be able to help you out with that. So you've been at Raza 6-ish months, is that right?
It'll be, I think this is 4 now. So I joined the beginning of December.
Huh. So I think the thing that is always interesting for me, and I think the community as well, is since you joined Raza, I'm sure folks in the Raza community are not surprised to hear that we are a very fast-moving engineering team, lots of changes, lots of improvements, bug fixes. What has been your favorite change to Raza or Raza X, Raza Open Source or Raza X, since you joined?
Yeah, I definitely think end-to-end learning. I feel like it's such a cool feature and has so much potential. Especially if it works well, like it'll just totally change the game of building assistants. So that's been my favorite so far.
Yeah, definitely solves a lot of problems. I also appreciate that. I know that uh, Alan is very big. Sorry, Alex is very big on getting rid of intents entirely. But I do like that you can combine the two, right? So it's a little bit more of a
Mhm.
hybrid system, and you have the sort of the seatbelt of intents when you need them, and the sort of the safety rails there. But you can also handle more nebulous, uh, harder to categorize. I'm going to say that interactions. Hi,
Yeah,
everyone.
totally.
Welcome, welcome.
I think too, like it'll make like migrating to when end-to-end learning is like a more of like a production feature. And make migrating existing bots over to like incorporating that new feature much easier as well because you don't have to like completely rebuild everything from scratch. So
Yeah, definitely. Uh, feel free, folks who are watching, to ask any questions you have about Raza or conversational AI or general in the chat, and we'll get around to answering them. Um, Another question is, so you, like Ben, you work with a lot of our corporate clients, and I actually tend to work more with individual developers. And something that's always interesting to me to hear more about is what are the particular challenges for conversational AI that corporate clients run into that someone who's building a small assistant for a personal project won't run into, and how do you go about helping people with those challenges?
yeah, for more of like the corporate clients, I think the the biggest thing that usually comes up is like how do I scale and meaning that in like every sense of the word too. Like technically, how do I make sure that this bot handles the kind of load that we're expecting to see? When we put this on a public facing website, there's a lot of stuff that goes on there, but then as well, we think about scale from the sense of like the processes that they have in place for following CDD and so on. Like it's really important that they have good processes in place for when they have thousands of messages coming in on a daily basis and making sure that all of these things are set up ahead of time to make sure that they can review it and incorporate it into building a better bot. So just across the board, it's like, okay, how do we take what we have here and scale this across our company, across the website, and everything? So it's a lot of our work revolves around that.
Yeah, I think that can also dovetail nicely with Amina's question, which is, can you tell us a few tasks your day to day?
Yeah, good question. It's a really fun job. I think like our primary responsibility is we're paired with a few clients that are subscribers to our Rasa Enterprise product, and the primary responsibility is just really making sure that they succeed. Um, so on a day-to-day basis, that could be helping them troubleshoot some code. It could be as well like going through some training Like when we onboard a new client, typically we'll have like a sort of workshop up front to really train them on all the different ways within Rasa and how to follow different best practices. So it can be anything from like debugging code to talking about user experience with them. So anything that kind of revolves around that client process. But then currently as well, like our team technically owns the documentation here.
And
So
we are all eternally grateful. Y'all do such a good job.
so we'll, another day we could just be making updates to documentation, working on a starter pack. So there's some other things that kind of revolve around, when we don't have some more day-to-day client work.
Yeah. The starter packs in particular, I'm always pointing people to look at. They're so helpful. They're fully featured, but you can just like look at the features. Yeah, the customer success engineering team, superheroes, and y'all make my job so much better, and you help the community so much. Yeah. Uh, yeah. So I just want to circle back to a point that you made, because something that I've just been thinking about a lot recently is um, team structure, right? So thinking about the difference between like me building my bot on live coding versus like the folks that you're helping with, very different scale, but also a lot more division of labor. So you're probably going to have some sort of engineer, developer. You might have like a conversational designer. You might have, a UX person. You might have a UX researcher if you're super lucky. You might have, a product manager or a project manager to help oversee the thing. And I'm wondering if you could share, obviously, keeping confidential information confidential, but are there sort of general patterns you see of teams that are really successful?
hmm Yeah, they vary a ton. I think the things that stand out about the most successful ones, I would say of like a standard team, you can think of usually having like a couple developers and then someone that's more business oriented to help guide the team on where to take certain things. But then the ones that are really successful, the two main roles that kind of come to mind are one, having someone that's dedicated to DevOps, because
Mm.
managing a Kubernetes deployment, making sure that a CI/CD pipeline is up to date and constantly being worked on is just huge when you have like a bigger bot. So having someone dedicated to those roles is a really good attribute of a successful team. And then I'd say the second one is kind of how you're mentioning for the really fortunate, just someone that's dedicated to UX in general. And
Mm.
like you don't necessarily have to have like one focus on design and one focus on research too. Like if you have the resources for it, then great, like all the better. But someone that's coming in and driving, hey, here's how the bot should start out, and this is where we want to guide the user, and the kind of answers that you're crafting as well. Like can the way that we word this capture more than like the specific question that they asked? There's so much that you can do from a UX perspective that like when people come to us with a problem, they're like, hey, this is what I'm running into. Like, how do I fix this in my stories or rules? It can be a much easier fix to like change your welcome message, for example. Like, hey, here are the things that the bot can handle. And when you have a UX person, those things are a lot more obvious versus just adding, feature after feature.
Yeah, and that's a pattern that I've also, if anyone has questions, please feel free to answer them. Stick them in the chat. You're not interrupting at all. Um, and that's something that I've seen. I think it's kind of a pattern I've noticed. I might even call it an anti-pattern, where a problem arises. It's clear that there is a problem with the conversation. It's clear that like some sector of users or some like use cases just aren't being met well, and then the solution is add more machine learning, right? Add more features, add another machine learning engineer, and you can sort of like machine learning your way out of it. But somebody said something to me recently that really stuck with me. Like, more of the same poison is not going to fix your problem. So like the thing that got you into the problem isn't necessarily going to get you out of it.
Mhm.
And having someone who has that skill set of writing responses. There's a fantastic talk at the Raza Summit that's on our YouTube channel about this, up relatively recently, about like designing assistant responses. It's not it seems because we all do conversations every day, you think it would be straightforward to like, anyone can write a conversational turn. We're talking. This is a conversation, but it's such a skill, and it really
Hmm.
does take time, and it can, you know, drastically improve somebody's experience with an assistant if it's like really thoughtful answers. Um,
Yeah, totally. It makes me think too of this. I've seen this bot before that it was like an internal IT bot, and the team designed a personality around it. So it was like a dog that was talking to them, and uh, they put it live super early, which obviously like we recommend. Um, and when the dog bot didn't understand, it would just say like, "Whoop, sorry, I don't get that." And because it was like, it was more playful. People were a lot more receptive to the bot failing versus, like the typical, "Sorry, I don't understand. Can you repeat that?" And more of like I don't know, more of like a robotic kind of response giving back to them. So it was just like a simple way for you to really implement CDD because you can get started a lot sooner, and you can people are more okay with like the bot failing.
yeah, yeah, and managing expectations as well. Like if you tell me like this is a dog or a bird, I'm going to have different expectations of how well it's going to do and how many things it can handle than if you say this is the world's most advanced AI, open
Yeah,
domain, can
totally.
answer anything. I have really high expectations for that system, whereas like this is a friendly dog that helps you book time off. Like that, I have a much more, I think, realistic understanding of the goals. I know I'm talking about dogs. Sorry, my dog is in my lap. Um, yeah. Amina has a question. Sorry, I'm having trouble reading. How do you handle bugs in front of a client, for instance, in a demo, and things that don't go as expected? It did work perfectly before, but in front of the client, it magically changed its behavior. I'm familiar with this unfortunate magic trick.
Yeah, magic trick, exactly. That's a really good question. I mean, I guess it depends on the audience. I mean, I think something that's good to do is to have a recording of the demo up front too.
Mm,
So if you're testing it like right before live and it seems like it's finicky, to just use a recorded demo instead and just always having that as a backup is a good plan. But if you are doing a live demo and the bug just happens, um, I don't know. I think it's just like acknowledging it and saying, "Oh yeah, that didn't work, and that's a bug," and maybe that's a good segue into CDD, for example, and just talk
mm,
about how this is a demo. Like this isn't something that we spent months developing and testing with users and getting their feedback and improving it that way. So you can kind of phrase it into similarly when your team starts to build this up. So imagine it's some executive team you're building for, like you can expect the demo too that they build for it to not handle questions that you have, and talk more about that process of it takes time and you need to test it as much as possible in order to overcome things like this. So yeah, I would try to just like reframe the conversation, but then definitely trying to have some fail safes up front, like having a recorded demo can be really helpful too.
yeah. I think I probably run into live bugs slightly more than you do because I do more sort of informal stuff with my live coding. Um, and if it's like an actual like bug with my code, I find it really helpful to actually go through the troubleshooting process and be like, let's go to the Raza docs. Usually the answer is in the docs, which is fantastic. But also if like I'm trying to convince somebody to use a framework, if I'm like, here's a problem, and I can find the solution really easily. There's really good support. I can go to the forums. Oh, there we go. Forums. I was like, where's my animation? I can go to the forums for more support if I need it after this, and then talking through that troubleshooting process. Because if somebody's trying to sell you a piece of software and they're like, this software never has bugs, they're lying. Why are they lying to you? Hmm. Uh, and I think instead being like, hey, if this is like a code problem, here's what the problem is. We can fix it. Let's fix it together if you have time. And if it's more of a machine learning data thing, I think it's really important. I mean, not just for clients, but for anyone who's using systems to help them build realistic expectations of how systems are going to go. Um, you know, the I don't want to say it's secret sauce because it's all open source, but um, the mechanisms that make Raza Assistant run, they have certain parts of their behavior that are deterministic. If I've seen a certain conversation, I can have that same conversation again if I'm following it exactly. But the thing that makes them able to handle new things that they haven't seen before is that they are stochastic, right? They're guessing. So it's not always easy to predict, you know, a completely new utterance that you've never seen before, that maybe somebody is phrasing things in a way your assistant hasn't seen before and you haven't included in your training data. It's not always easy to understand ahead of time what the prediction is going to be for that particular turn. And that's okay. And that's just like part of machine learning. And the way that you have that happen less often is you add more and more data that is a good fit for the data your users are actually going to produce, and doing CDD early. So it's machine learning engineering is interesting because if you have a system that is 100% reliable on your test data, your evaluation data, I should say, not for like code testing, something's up, right? Your system isn't going to extrapolate. And that's very different from like normal software engineering, where like you do want all your tests to pass. If all of them don't, something's up. So it's a little bit of a mental shift as well that can be time to wrap your head around.
Yeah, I would say the mental shift too. It's like especially, um, I don't know. It's like something that is because like I know bots have been around too, but most people are still just now like starting to develop these on like a mass scale, and it's that mental shift like from the users like explaining to them upfront like how the bot can be used all the way across to like people in your company too. It's just a total shift like you were talking about, and it's super helpful for your team and for you developing and like getting people to rally around the project like the earlier you get that mental shift across.
Question from Catherine. Guys, I was encountering a problem with a project recently. Ooh. So I was wondering, is there a way to do slot validation for categorical slot besides a custom action?
I don't think so. What was the what was the or I guess what's your issue with doing like a validation custom action? Just like having to write more code or
I could also see where if it's like the only thing you need to have a custom action for, then sort of spin up a server, you gotta like do your
yeah, true.
tests. And I remember somebody talking about validating roles recently, but I think they were talking about how it did. Let me just quickly, I'm gonna go to the forum. I think you could get part of the way with um I don't see station I'm remembering. It also might have been on a different platform. I'm trying to remember where I saw this conversation. Sorry, that's why I'm completely zoning out here. Uh Catherine says, I was just wondering if there's another way built.
Hmm. No, there's not, but I'm
The doc. Oh no, this is YAML
there's
validation. That is not at all what I'm looking for.
under concepts actions and then forms. There's on the right under advanced usage. The first one is validating form input.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah,
And
unfortunately.
I'm like, if you're doing something like a validation, as you continue work on the assistant, I often find that if I need to validate data, also I generally end up needing to do other things with a custom action. Um, not always, but that's sort of like a pattern that I've noticed in my work building slots. Yeah. If not, custom action is totally fine.
Yep.
That would be my my recommendation. I mean, it says great advice. Thanks. Thank you. I hope it's helpful. I don't see any other questions in the chat right now. Again, please feel free to ask your questions. Um, I don't think we need the forms anymore. Yeah. So I had a question that I wanted to ask you. Didn't write it down on my little notepad, and I should have because it's just like fluttered out of my brain like a beautiful butterfly. Um, which is sort of a question that I ask a lot of folks while I'm trying to was is what's the best chatbot you've ever used?
Hmm. That's,
Or like your favorite?
yeah, I always liked get the name of it now. It was like one of the first bots that was big on Messenger a few years ago. It was
Mm.
like the hipster cat bot. I can't remember the name of it now. You know what I'm talking about?
I do not. I'm gonna have to look this up.
It was like a weather
Hipster.
bot. But I just like the personality that the Micah, I think that was it. MICA. Is that it?
Micah, the hipster cat. Discover hip.
Wait, no, I think I'm thinking about a different one.
Was it this one?
No, I don't think that was it. Messenger.
Oh, like it's a venue
I can't remember.
recommendation.
I thought it was a cat. Poncho, that was it.
Poncho.
Yeah, weather cat from Brooklyn. I just thought like the personality on it was really nice. If you just did weather, but um, I just thought it was a fun experience, and it was like earlier on when everyone was building bots on Messenger, and um,
That's fun. I like
yeah,
that. Uh, and so here are some sample. I'm highlighting these to increase the contrast because the contrast on this website is not super accessible. You can like ask for weather. Is it snowing in New York? Do I need an umbrella today? What's the 5-day forecast? Stop notifications, change setting, and look. That is fun.
yeah.
And actually, the
I was gonna say like even a small thing like building a custom avatar for it. I think just I don't know, just like adds more personality to the bot and makes like the experience more fun.
also I have a preference for bots that are not people and specifically aren't women. There's a lot of discussion on sort of the NLP research about having assistants that have like servant-like qualities be women by default and sort of like the little bit of a baggage that comes with that. So I tend to like sort of like gender neutral animal assistants. Uh, and then we have some more questions on the chat, but if they die down, we can come back and talk about these fun bots. Um, yeah. Amina says, oh, we got quite a few questions. So I'm gonna start with Tanbui. I installed Raza X on AWS ECS server. I have not used Raza on that. So I was able to do a UI with domain name. I was able to access the health and version API endpoints, but I couldn't access the webhook. What am I?
Yeah, I think you need to enable the REST API in your Are you using the standard Helm chart?
And it'll be wait a little bit before we get an answer to that from
Okay,
Jan,
just
just because
that.
there's a delay between us and the video, and then people have to like catch up and then type. Yeah. Only the web not accessible.
Are you talking about just slash webhook is typically like the action endpoint URL too. So are you also running an action server? Is that something you should have to stand up separately?
I will actually be doing that, not on AWS, but the process is very similar. On Friday in live coding, we'll be adding an action to our existing X instance. That might be. Also, we have other videos on it if you don't want to watch me do it live very slowly.
Okay, I'm just looking through the open source HTTP API too. I can't remember if there was a slash webhook in there too.
Oh, somewhere else, but I was looking that up. Or at least start to answer Amina's next question. Following your tip on whenever you have a viable bot, you go to Rasa X. Fantastic, excellent. And apply CDD. I did this, and in the morning I noticed the domain.yaml structure had changed. When I went back to the previous mode in my terminal, I found some user warning, load domain failed, and the found intent was in points, but not in the domain, which is weird because it worked fine before. I have a list of intents in domain.yaml. So if you have your assistant connected to GitHub, so if you have your GitHub and your Raza X instance connected and you are changing things in your Raza X interface, it will, and then you push to GitHub, it will change your code. It'll change your YAML files with your um, interesting that sounds like load domain. I would post about this in the forum. This sounds like it might be a bug, unless you run into this.
No, I don't think so. I would say forum. Um, and also I was just blanking on it before, so I'm assuming by any of the webhooks APIs, you're talking about the REST channel, just trying to hit the REST endpoint, because that's part of the endpoint there. And I would just double check that you have it turned on in your values YAML. If you search for REST, there's something that you can uncomment. So there's potential that you don't have it turned on and you just need to redeploy with that on.
That here's your Tim says, what do I need to enable? Action server to be run as well. I mean, if you need an action server, you should run your action server. It'll depend on if you have actions. But I think what Chris was talking about is in your Raza instance, right?
What,
I think rest is in here in the credentials you're talking about, or is it something in the chart?
yeah, if you deploy via Helm, there's another option in that that you can uncomment and provide like the REST channel.
If you want to send that to me in the chat, I can share the page as well.
Yeah.
Rashmi said, how's this support to deploy Raza on Windows Server? So I believe we support Raza X and Raza open source for local mode on Windows. I don't believe we officially support Windows Server for Raza X. So I would say the support is feel free to ask questions in the forums, but I don't believe that it's officially a supported platform. But you were also not the first person to ask about that, so I might bring that up with product. It sounds like more people than we might have expected are using Windows Server in particular. Let's start a new page so I actually. Says, huh?
So you may be able to, if you just do a manual install, I think it could just be our install scripts that don't work on it. You know? I haven't personally deployed there, but
so this is to answer Tan's question about the REST endpoints not being accessible. Trying a manual.
Oh no, from the Windows Server question.
Oh, Windows Server.
Yeah, I think it's just our quick install script, because those are a collection of like bash scripts, for example. I think that's just what requires Linux, but if you have like Docker running on a Windows machine, for example, it should not have an issue with installing Rasa X there. You just have to use like the manual install.
So I know that this looks very weird because I'm zoomed in, so it's bigger. And also I have squished my window a little bit, but the manual installation will work on a modern Linux or Windows distribution that can run Docker. And again, please feel free to forum. I know listen, I'm very proud of my animation. I'm going to keep bringing it up. So it's forum.raza.com if you have additional questions. And YS has a question. I'm new in NLP. Oh, welcome to the field. Does Raza have a dialogue state tracker architecture like TED for policy and Diet for MLU? Yeah, so for policies, usually you'll use multiple ones, and it'll pick what to do next based on the policy that has the highest confidence. But we do also have a tracker. We call it the tracker store. I don't remember where it is in the documentation. The architecture diagram is probably best. The screen so you can see what I'm clicking on. I think the architecture diagram is going to be the easiest place to see. There we go. So the sort of thing that we have that's like a dialogue state tracker is the the tracker store. And this is what stores everything that's happened in the conversation before. So all of the predictions for the whole conversation, all of the raw text, all of the sort of like decisions of what's going to happen next. And then the lock store is when the user has said something and the assistant is deciding what to do. Just like don't change anything until we're done with that process. The file system is just like all the stuff that you're using to get your assistant to work. And then the agent's responses and ability to process text rely on both the NLU pipeline and the dialogue policies. And you set these in the domain.yaml file. And usually people will use TED if it'll work for their use case, which it will, as well as a memoization, which basically says, if I see the same thing I've seen in my training stories, same pattern of conversation, we're going to keep having that conversation. And then if you have any rules, a rule policy.
So I sent you the link in the Zoom chat.
All right, let's see if I can get. Sorry, I just want to make sure y'all can see this. There we go. Okay. Okay, so this is
Line
the helm
one.
chart.
Yeah, so this is our values file for the Rasa X helm chart. So it's basically how you customize the deployment. And if you see on line 134 right there, there's rest that's commented out.
Oh, that's so small. I'm so sorry. Let me zoom in.
So if you uncomment rest and then remove the curly braces, that should enable rest for you, and that should get the webhook API working, your endpoint.
And this is to answer Tian's question about the webhook not being available.
Yes. But if that still doesn't work, feel free to post a forum question with like the errors and so on, and tag me or someone else can take a look.
Thank you. I would not have known to look for that there, but now I do. Other questions? Catherine says, might be off topic, but since you were talking about Poncho, I'm curious about what your approach or opinion about bot persona design is.
My opinion of them is that I think they're great. I think that to do it right, you should have some kind of content writer that that is thinking about this at like a holistic level. So it's not just like you coming in and saying like, you know, okay, I'm going to make it a cat now, and then just start acting like it. But like, in contrast, someone that is, I guess, like generally more skilled in writing would be able to like look at all the answers together and be like, okay, like how can I convey the persona across this? So I would say like if you're going to do it, make sure you like go all in on it and have like someone really take charge of it and look at it across the whole bot.
It's definitely a skill, and I'm constantly in awe of designers. I don't know how they do it.
Yeah.
And I have nothing but appreciation. Yeah. And yeah, I think it's important because I think even if you don't think you're explicitly giving your assistant a persona, you kind of are. Yeah. Vortex says, cool stuff. Thank you. Randy says, the community is great, but what should you do if you post a question and no one responds? How long should you wait? I think ideally, hopefully someone gets it within 3 business days. But what counts as a business day may vary dramatically depending on who specifically is taking at it.
Yeah, like I was just out for 10 days, for example. So anyone that asked me a question didn't get a response for a while. I think it'd be okay if you see like someone else that's answering the question, just to tag them directly too, if it's been a bit. And then, you know, if it's someone else within Rasa, like we can coordinate internally on who can help respond. But you know, sometimes it could just be like the person didn't see it, or you know, they're out on vacation or something like that.
Yeah, and every so often, like I'll have a question and I'll need somebody else's input on it, and then like I'll talk to that person, and then like they'll be like on vacation because it's Europe. Yeah, so I always say like if it's been like 5 days, rule of thumb to Amina says, great question. What do you do when you have examples that can be in 2 different This is where I would use end-to-end learning. You want to talk about that a little bit, Chris?
Yeah, so examples that could be in either intent. I think like with end-to-end learning, it's easier because you don't have to think about like how do I separate out these intents. You just kind of give both the examples that are rather the same or similar, and then you know give the corresponding answer after that. So you don't have to worry so much about combining them or so on. But I would say outside of end-to-end learning, if I hear that they're the same or very similar, my immediate response would be like, okay, like maybe your intents are too granular. Could you look at combining these into a single intent and use entities to then distinguish between them in your response? That's usually what's happening.
Yeah, it's a really good point. Yeah, I was thinking of examples of something that can be like hello and goodbye. But yeah, if you know someone's trying to book a trip and you have multiple ways that they can ask to do that, that might like it's a hard machine learning question, right? Like if you can't tell as a human what category it should go into, it's not going to be, resolved by your intent classification.
Yeah.
Or rather it will be, but maybe in a way that's not very useful. Um and Vortex says, so responding to that, two separate, an utterance that can be multiple intents. I think the general guideline is that you merge the intents and then use stories to separate handling assistance based on entities involved. Yeah, it's a great pattern for handling that sort of. Alexand. Oh, it's either Alexandra, probably. Sorry if I'm saying that wrong. Says, can we use text to speech and speech to text easily on Raza, please?
Yeah. So there's a number of ways to kind of plug it in. I think we have some built out stuff with Twilio.
Ooh,
Let me
do
double
we?
check. Or at least like an example Git repo.
So we've got a blog post about it that walks through it. Um, so this might be a good resource to check out. And the link here is blog.raza.com/folio-voice-raza-tutorial. I know we also have, it's a little bit out of date, but we have a Mozilla voice that used to wrote. Although I think a lot of the Mozilla voice people left to found a startup, so that whole situation I think in flux right now. Um,
Yeah,
yeah.
but outside of the example here, basically the two approaches you could take is you know what? Here's the Twilio picture. Oh, that's Christmas. You can, rather use the existing REST channel within Rasa. So you handle the transcription outside of Rasa itself. And then whenever you get that transcription from speech to text, you just send it to the REST endpoint and then take the response and transcribe it back. But if you don't want to have like, your own orchestration layer outside of that, you could look at building a custom connector inside of Rasa. So it's all happening just in that same input block of you have your initial call coming in from speech, and in that same connector, you're then just calling Rasa and getting the response back.
Yeah, I hope that helps. I know it's not exactly like a built-in thing, but the the support for sort of using a lot of different APIs, whatever works best for your particular use case. Um, it does make it more flexible, right? It lets more people do that. I know it's frustrating if you're looking for a very simple thing to handle voice. OS says, thank you very much. Oh, you're very welcome. I'm glad we could help. Amina says, will the assistant pick the most recent model? Is it based on the date and
So it kind of depends how you're running it. If you're just looking at like Rasa shell and running Rasa locally, then yeah, it picks it off the date. But then typically when you have like a model, when you are deploying a bot, you're typically telling Rasa like where the model is actually living. So like if you're running this in Docker, for example, uh, you could be mounting the model inside of a directory and you'll be telling Rasa that it's there. Or another pattern is using Rasa X as like a model serve. So you give Rasa like an endpoint that is from Rasa X to ping every so often to see if there's an updated model. So it kind of just depends how to run it. But yeah, in general, it's if you're just running this locally, it'll pick whatever the latest model is from your models directory. But then usually you're specifying it when you actually have this deployed somewhere.
that helps. helps. And I believe the way that the most recent thing is decided, you maybe already knew this, is that when the model is trained, the date is in the model name.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's obvious or not. I don't know. Sometimes I miss things that in hindsight I would consider obvious, but yeah. Mozilla says, Alexander says, sorry, Mozilla is out of date. But thanks very much. I'll go check that out. Yeah, I hope that helps. And while we're waiting for more questions to come in, I noticed two things about these since they're both cats. So this cat that helps you learn about the weather, and then this cat that tells you about like a place to go in a particular city. And I feel like both of these are interactions that really work as a conversation. I don't know if you've ever been in the situation when I went to conferences, the before times. I would often be in a group of people and we'd be like, okay, none of us are from here. We just need a place to go get lunch in like the hour that we have that's like in walking distance. And, you know, Jan is vegetarian and Carlos, you know, is allergic to gluten. So we need someplace that can handle both of those things. And for me, doing that interaction through a UI was not, because I was given too many options. I didn't have a strong preference for the options. I had like specific qualities that I needed, but I didn't care, right? I was given too much information for like the time crunch. And I think that a situation like that is a really good place to have a conversational interface, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like it reduces the choice fatigue. We're all hangry and we're like, just need a sandwich. Where can we go? Where Carlos can get his, you know, lettuce wraps or whatever will work for him.
Yeah, actually, when I used to live in New York City, there was this restaurant review site that I like that would do. They started this like text service that you could just text them what you're looking for, and they would just send you like two options, and it was perfect. You say like, "Hey, I'm here with coworkers, and we're in East Village, and I just want to take them to one place for lunch that gives them an unforgettable New York experience." And they would just text you like two things to go look at. So yeah, you don't have to go look around. And the whole time I was using this experience, I was like, wow, this would be perfect for a bot. And it's just like so much easier because you go to as you're mentioning, you go to like Yelp or something, and there's just so many options. Like, and they're all rated above 4 stars. So like, how do you know what to pick?
8,000 filters.
Yeah, it's just too many options there for you. So I totally agree. I think that's a great candidate for a good conversational use case.
And I would really contrast it, at least for myself, again, thinking about going to conferences in the before time with booking flights. Because for flights, there's no time crunch. I don't need to like eat in the next 10 minutes. I can usually have like a little bit more time to figure it out. And also, I do care about all those fields, right? I do care about like, am I flying through O'Hare? I would prefer not to, especially in January or something like that. I do care about like time zones. I care about like layovers. I care about all these different pieces of information to make a decision. Whereas in a situation like this, I just want a few pieces of information. I don't need a large amount of surrounding information. Just something I've been thinking about with what makes something a good candidate for conversation. Ken has a question. If I run Raza X locally, not using Docker, I can access the endpoints using ngrok. So these are the webhooks. But I can't access the endpoints when the Docker Compose is on AWS, DigitalOcean, or Google Cloud using the same.
Usually the first thing I would check for are those ports open on your VM, because usually by default they're closed off.
No, they are for Google Cloud for sure.
Yeah, like anytime
I think.
Yeah, I'm sure I haven't run them on the other servers, but anytime we stand something up on Google Cloud, that's one of the first things we have to make sure is that our firewall is not blocking those ports for that machine. So that's probably the first place I would look.
Yeah, I've done that. I was like, it's working. Why can't I make any requests? Oh, and Enrique says, oh, hey, Enrique. Check your if you have property security group to reach the ports for the API. Yeah, especially if it's working well.
Yep.
Amina says, sorry about skipping your question. In the YAML files, does the order of paragraphs matter? For example, if I'm putting the slots before the intents, domain.yaml, does that change?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
I don't know if I've played around with it too much, but
I don't think it matters in the YAML. I think in the markdown, I don't know the order mattered, but what was in what file mattered more. And part of the reason that we switched to YAML, this is my understanding, you can correct me if I'm wrong, Chris, is that the YAML files can be, you can have information across multiple different files. It matters less what they're called. So you have a lot more flexibility in how you set up the text data to interact with it. Whereas with Markdown, we were more restricted. And I think by convention, you tend to have like entities, slots, responsive forms. But I don't think that's required.
yeah, I don't think so. Like, for example, I was just building an example the other day where I had different use case responses built out into different files. So again, the fact that they were in separate files, I can't imagine it would make any difference. But yeah, just the benefit there is you can have some segregation. I mean, even across like entire domain files, you could split them up by use case. But in this particular case, like it was beneficial to keep certain responses just to their own file so that whoever needed to edit those responses could do so. So I split those out, and that worked well.
Yeah. If it does, if it does matter, I would also be surprised.
Yeah, and we're sorry.
Good question, though.
Yeah.
Because the YAML files all get like parsed and really quickly, I haven't skipped any questions because sometimes I do that and it's never intentional. But reading is hard for me in particular. Yeah, I think that's all the questions we have so far. Again, please feel free to pop your questions in the chat. We've got about 5 minutes. We could probably do like 1 or 2 more if we're quick. So I have kind of a selfish question for you, Chris. I have been really trying to learn more about container orchestration. Do you have any favorite learning resources for someone who's interested in learning more about Docker or Kubernetes or Helm or any of the whole bits of the ecosystem?
Oh gosh, yeah. There's there's so much out there. I mean, like personally, I've only done some OpenShift training. Like they had some really good training, but you have to pay for it. So I did a few courses there, but like honestly, I think the best thing is just to like try them. Like say you're working with Rasa, for example, like try to deploy it on multiple different platforms and then just kind of Google throughout it like what you don't really understand as you go about it. Because we have pretty clear instructions on, here's how you deploy on Docker versus here's how you deploy on Kubernetes. And so you can just follow that, and then I think it kind of introduces you to the different concepts as it kind of goes on.
And I will say, as someone who is, again, I would say in the learning experience of containers, I have found it really, really straightforward to be able to it. I'm specifically the different installation things, but I've found it pretty straightforward to use Helm and Docker with the Raza docs. Could I, deploy any given application? Probably with enough Googling.
Well, let's say a good once you deploy this, say on Docker Compose, I think a really good next step is then taking a custom action server and go through the process of packaging that into your own image and putting that up
Mm.
on Docker Hub and then adding that to your deployment. I think it's kind of like the next step and gives you a better understanding of how code turns into a container. Um, so and obviously we have instructions for that too, but then you're kind of getting a bit more of the behind the scenes look at how all this is created.
Um, oh, Ella, Ella says you popped up on my homepage while YouTubing. Hi, Ella. Uh, Sabir says, Ella's a Raza. How do you configure a multi-language bot which can use a different domain / NLU files based on the language slot value beings? Oh, that's gonna be
It's a tough one.
a complex deployment. Um, so
um,
for me,
yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say the thing that's gonna be challenging there is if you have a different NLU pipeline for language. If you have an assistant where the languages are related enough that you can use the same NLU pipeline, and also you have enough data, training data of both languages that you can sort of handle them together, um, you could potentially train a single model and use a single NLU pipeline. It's going to require a lot of data, and you might come into weird edge cases in terms of the NLU stuff. Um, I would personally, I'd build two bots.
Yeah, if you go down the one bot path, what that would look like from like the response side is, um, well, basically you would just have, you could have a domain file that has, your French responses, and then another domain file that has all of your English responses, and then you'll basically just have to have branching logic in all of your rules and stories, or build every response into a custom action that is then branching off of that slot variable of the language that is set. So I tend to agree with Rachel. I think in general it's easier just to kind of split it out into two bots, and then um, you could even have like something sitting on top that is just detecting the language and then routing it to the right bot for you. Could make your life easier and have a single interface. But yeah, ultimately it's just difficult to kind of think about how you combine the classification side.
I would say, given that you already have a slot that um, sets the language, presumably for the whole conversation, presumably if you are treating this as a slot, people are not switching back and forth in the middle of the conversation, then I'd probably have like assistant handoff to whichever assistant is for the specific. That's what I do, just to make my life easier. Oh, Enrique has some suggestions for learning more about Docker. The Docker Certified Associate Exam Guide, very good, from Pact. And then he got it from, so Pact is a publisher. I got it from a colleague of mine, and it was very cheap. He's trying to get my mobile. Oh, no worries. Thank you, Enrique. Yeah, might be a good thing to check out. And I think we have about, we have time for one more quick question. I hope that was helpful, Sabir. Another non-English question. If I want to do a chatbot in French, the only changes I will need to be in the two dots in the config file is language French, and the examples in the NLU and the bot's responses. Can you correct me if I'm wrong, please? French does have first class support from Spain. I'm pretty
Yeah,
sure.
that's the only thing, would just be checking the components in your pipeline, making sure that they have French support, which I think all of our standard ones do. But other than that, that seemed correct.
And if that isn't working, yeah, I'd post about it on the forum. But that should work, because I'm pretty sure that all of the pretty sure all the components in our default pipeline will work for French.
Yeah, they should.
And French is white space tokenized like English, so you
Yeah.
shouldn't run into. So, Spear gives me some ideas. Thanks for help. You're very welcome. Thanks for tuning. And Ten says, Rachel and Chris, thank you for your help today. You guys are awesome. Oh, looking forward to the action server on Friday. Thank you. I'm excited. It's been a couple months since I spun up an action server, so it's sort of an action server like in as part of like a Helm chart for the whole thing in a Raza X deployment. So just that. Thank you so much for joining, Chris. I really appreciate you coming in and subbing out at the last minute for Ben. And thank you everybody for joining. We've got tomorrow we've got reading group. We're going to be reading about NLU benchmarks, and it's by the paper's by Sam Bowman, who always has a really strong point of view that I really enjoy. So it should be a little bit of a should be a really interesting paper that's fun to read. And then on Friday we'll do live coding, and we'll be back next Wednesday for more Rasa Office Hours. And in the meantime, if you have any questions, you know what I'm going to say. Head over to the forum. Thanks for joining, everybody. Thanks for joining, Chris.